The assumption is that intelligence makes life easier. Faster answers, better decisions, less friction. The research tells a more complicated story. Intelligence doesn't just change how you solve problems. It changes how you experience everything around you, often in ways nobody else can see. 8 hidden struggles, each one studied independently by psychologists across very different corners of the field. Let's go through them. They overthink everything. Psychologist Susan Nolen-Hoeksema spent decades researching what she called response styles theory, focused specifically on rumination, the tendency to replay a situation repeatedly instead of moving past it. Her research found something counterintuitive. Rumination doesn't function like productive problem solving, even though it feels like it should. Past a certain point, it actively impairs decision-making and mood, rather than improving either. A highly analytical mind generates more angles to replay in the first place. More perspectives to consider becomes more material for the loop to run on, which is exactly why extra intelligence can produce more mental noise, not less. They often feel misunderstood. In 1973, sociologist Robert Weiss proposed an important distinction: social loneliness versus emotional loneliness. Social loneliness comes from lacking a network of people around you. Emotional loneliness comes from lacking someone who truly understands you. And Weiss found the two don't require each other at all. Someone can be constantly surrounded by people and still register as emotionally lonely if none of those interactions reach the depth they're looking for. For people who crave conversations about ideas, meaning, or the mechanics behind things, everyday small talk can satisfy the social side of Weiss's model, while leaving the emotional side completely unmet. 3. They notice things other people miss. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research introduced the concept of sensory processing sensitivity, a measurable trait describing deeper cognitive processing of environmental and emotional information, present in roughly 15 to 20% of the population. Aron's studies found this depth of processing comes with a real cost. More stimulation gets registered, which means more potential for overstimulation and mental fatigue from environments other people move through without noticing much at all. Catching the inconsistency, the subtle mood shift, the thing nobody else flagged. Aron's research suggests that's not extra effort. It's what the system does by default, whether it's wanted in that moment or not. 4. They feel pressure to live up to expectations. In 1978, psychologists Pauline Clance and Csikszentmihalyi Imes coined the term impostor phenomenon, the persistent feeling of being fraudulent despite clear external evidence of competence. Their research, originally focused on high-achieving women, found this pattern is reinforced by exactly the dynamic described here. The more someone is labeled capable, the more any mistake gets treated as surprising rather than normal, which quietly raises the personal cost of failing at all. "I thought you were smart" isn't a neutral comment under Clance and Imes's framework. It's precisely the kind of feedback that trains the imposter pattern to stay switched on. 5. They get bored more easily. Psychologist Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow found that engagement depends on a specific match. Challenge level has to roughly meet skill level. Too much challenge relative to skill produces anxiety. Too little produces boredom. His research placed this precisely on the map, not as a vague complaint, but as a predictable zone. For a highly capable mind, ordinary routine tasks often sit well below the challenge threshold that skill requires. Csikszentmihalyi's model predicts exactly what follows: disengagement, restlessness, and a search for something that actually demands something back. Not laziness, a skill challenge mismatch, mapped out and named.
6. They struggle with perfectionism. Psychologists Gordon Flett and Paul Hewitt developed one of the field's most cited frameworks for this in 1991, multidimensional perfectionism, which separates self-oriented perfectionism, extremely high personal standards, from socially prescribed perfectionism, the belief that others demand perfection from you. Their research found both dimensions predict chronic dissatisfaction, because self-oriented perfectionism keeps the bar rising with every achievement, and socially prescribed perfectionism means the bar was never really under personal control to begin with. Either way, Flett and Hewitt's data shows the same outcome. Achievement stops registering as enough, no matter how much of it accumulates.
7. They question everything. Psychologist Kruglanski researched something he called need for cognitive closure, a measurable trait describing how strongly a person prefers firm, settled answers over open-ended ambiguity. His research found this trait varies widely between individuals, and that people low in need for closure genuinely find open questions more comfortable to sit with than premature certainty, even when that openness costs them the comfort everyone else gets from a simple answer. Living with unresolved questions in Kruglanski's framework isn't indecision. It's a different, measurable relationship with certainty itself. 8. They carry emotional weight others don't notice. The mechanism here traces back to emotional contagion research by Elaine Aron, John Cacioppo, and Richard Rapson. The tendency to unconsciously absorb the emotional states of people nearby. But psychologist Charles Figley's later research named the specific cost of doing this repeatedly: compassion fatigue. The accumulated exhaustion that builds in people who consistently absorb others' emotional pain, especially without strong boundaries in place. Empathy isn't the problem in Figley's framework. Empathy without a boundary around it is. And highly intelligent people who tend to notice suffering others miss in the first place often have more of it to absorb. Being highly intelligent was never really about having all the answers. Across 8 separate bodies of research, it looks more like carrying more input, more rumination material, more unmet depth, more sensory detail, more internalized pressure, more mismatch between skill and challenge, higher personal standards, more comfort sitting in ambiguity, and mere absorbed emotional weight. None of that is a flaw to fix. It's a different operating system, documented from 8 different angles by researchers who weren't even studying the same question. The goal was never to think less. It's to build the boundaries, rest, and self-compassion that let a mind like this run well instead of run itself down. If this felt personal, your mind isn't a burden. It's wired to process more, which was always going to come with a cost. Understanding the cost is what makes it manageable. If you're into the psychology behind intelligence, sensitivity, and the hidden weight most people never see, subscribe. Because here, we don't just describe behavior, we trace it back to the research.